Good afternoon, I'm Alan Unell, and this series of videos is Healthcare Advocacy, where we take problems in the healthcare system and then take action to try and make a better system for all of us. We have a lot of topics today, including poverty, which is an important component of healthcare. Before we get to that, I want to suggest that you look down below in the YouTube description box. You'll find a link to the Healthcare Advocacy newsletter that is the text for this video. You'll find all of the links to references, to background material, to organizations. It's all in there. And if you, of course, have questions, please put them in the YouTube description box for me, and I'll get to them as fast as I can. Let's talk about healthcare worker pay. Some of the lowest paid healthcare workers in California this week started to get a pay raise under a new California state law that will eventually increase their wages, their hourly wages, to $25 an hour. Workers at rural independent healthcare facilities will start making a minimum of $18 an hour, and others at hospitals that have about 10,000 full-time employees or more will be getting at least $23 an hour starting this week. This is the second and a half week of October 2024. The law will increase workers' pay over the next decade, with the $25 an hour rate kicking in sooner for some rather than others. About 350,000 workers are going to be paid more under this law, according to the University of California, Berkeley Labor Center. This is a step in the right direction because we have a poverty problem in America, and part of what fuels it is an incredibly low minimum wage. Federally, it is $7.25 an hour. It has not changed. I'm going to guess it's way more than a decade. You try and live on $14,500 a year. Just try. Anyway, hold that thought. I want to talk about intergenerational poverty. This is poverty that continues from one generation to another. I went to a meeting this week at the National Academy of Sciences. They held a review of a report that they commissioned on intergenerational poverty. The investigators were given a task to understand why poverty seems to persist generation to generation and what can be done to help alleviate it. Now, in the newsletter, you'll find a link to their report. You can download the PDF for free, which I didn't know, but that's just an incredible resource that the National Academy of Sciences has. Anyway, part of it, let me go off script for just a minute and tell you, part of the reason they got this is not just that there's a poverty problem that goes generation to generation, but there is a popular misconception that poverty overwhelmingly goes generation to generation, and that once you're poor, generations will be poor here on out, and they just stay that way forever. Well, that's part of the reason they did this study. On average, these researchers, measuring data for over 40 years or so, they found that if you're born poor, the odds are 2 to 1 you won't be poor when you grow up. That is, only about 34% of those people born into poor families grow up and are also poor. Well, that's good. That sort of dispels the myth. However, that's still 1 out of 3 people, and that's millions of people in the U.S. that are left behind, and they just can't make it out of poverty. Now, a huge problem is that our country is not set up with sufficient help for families, and especially mothers. Now, what does that include? That you have to have daycare and early childhood programs and helps for moms and year-round nutritional support, and housing assistance. There's a whole host of things. We believe people are there as a culture. We believe people are there to cheat the system. It is wrong. It is not true. And it is time that we accepted the truth and acted on truth instead of false narratives. I'll give you an example. People who make use of what's called temporary assistance to needy families, this is what used to be called welfare, they do not linger on the program. Typically, it's a mother who has just had a child and they need help for a couple of years. It's usually 2 years or less. No lingering. What they need is a hand up because there's not a social service network or collection of systems to help them. Now, if we really cared about families like we claim we do, we would have such social network systems in place that covered things like early care and maternal care and daycare and housing and that year-round nutrition, and we wouldn't have this discussion at all. I include a reference on the temporary assistance for needy families in the newsletter. If you're interested in this, I really recommend you go there and take a look, and they'll tell you how your state is doing. I'm going to have more reports on this in the future, and I got to tell you, in Yiddish, the word is shanda, but it is a disgrace how that money gets spent. Anyway, more on that later. What has been demonstrated to work, amongst other things, is raising the amount of money families have in their hands as children are growing up. It makes a huge difference in intergenerational poverty. It's not the only thing. There are a lot of other things to fix, but that one helps a lot. And federal programs like the Earned Income Tax Credit have a long history of helping. Increasing it will take more children out of poverty and give them a better chance at a significantly better life. So let's take an action. Let's let our federal elected representatives know what they can do to help alleviate childhood poverty. You can use t.bot on your cell phone. Just send a text message to 50409, that's the t.bot people, and the message is sign, S-I-G-N, space, PPSMHU. Sign, PPSMHU on your cell phone. This message will be emailed out to your member of Congress and senators. I'll just read it to you. I'm your constituent, and I just learned that if a child is born in poverty, they stand a 1 in 3 chance of being poor as an adult. Here is a link to the National Academy of Sciences report released October 17, 2024 on the subject. And of course, I include the link so their legislative analysts can go read it. There are lots of things that can help. Making sure that there's a basic level of income in the house is a major proven part of the solution. The Earned Income Tax Credit is a proven help to reducing child poverty. I want you to modify it to help that other third of children so that they have a chance to escape poverty. Here's what I want you to do. Combine an expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit with expanding coverage of the Child Care and Development Fund block grants to help address the problem of a mismatch between the timing of child care expenses and the EITC, Earned Income Tax Credit receipt, during a child's first year of life. That way they've got the money and they can maybe do something to help care for the child instead of waiting until tax time. Combine an expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit with expanding coverage of the Child Care and Development Fund block grant to provide a more generous and timely reimbursement for the child care expenses of low-income parents. And then, again, combine an expansion of the EITC with expanding coverage of the Child Care and Development Fund block grant along the lines of what was implemented temporarily for the 2021 tax year. In that tax year, so many children were lifted out of poverty because we had COVID and we decided families needed help. Well, I got news for you. COVID is waning, but families still need help. Anyway, while I have your attention, member of Congress, the federal minimum wage currently is at $7.25 an hour and should be increased to $15 to help those families living in such desperate conditions. I know you care about families. Please show it. Thank you. I want to talk about drugstores. They are closing at a pretty brisk clip. CVS is the largest U.S. chain of drugstores, closed 244 stores between 2018 and 2020. In 2021, they announced plans to close an additional 900 stores. Earlier this month, they said they're cutting 2,900 corporate jobs. Rite Aid, I don't know if you remember them, Rite Aid filed for bankruptcy last year, closing 500 stores. Drugstore chains are struggling because of lower reimbursement rates for prescription drugs, according to analysts who cover the industry. Now, the majority of drugstore sales come from filling prescriptions, but the profits they make that help bolster the business have plummeted in recent years as the reimbursement rates for prescription drugs fell and fees rose. Now, you can blame pharmacy benefit managers for that. We have talked long and loud about them. And if we had universal health care, we could just put them in the dumper. Anyway, the prices customers pay for drugs and payments that pharmacies receive are actually set by those pharmacy benefit managers. Let me go off script and tell you, there are 3 of them, CVS Caremark is one, that control between 80 and 90% of all prescriptions in the US. It is just amazing. Those PBMs take bribes from drug companies to put drugs on insurance plan formularies, the list of covered drugs for an insurance plan, and then tell drugstores to accept reimbursements for the entire formulary at the levels the PBM sets for that insurance company. And good and bad news, some of those drugs actually wind up being provided by the drugstore at a loss. That is, and the PBM gets away with it. They just tell the drugstore to suck it up because you need people to come in the door. And if you don't sign it, you don't have to deal with our insurance company at all. And then none of those people will walk in the door, and you have no chance of selling all the other things you sell in your store. Anyway, many other non-prescription items. There's tons of things. There's cosmetics, there's food, there's drinks, there's toys, there's all kinds of stuff. Many of those other items are actually sold all over the place. You can get it on Amazon, you can buy them online, you can get them in other discount outlets like Walmart. This again reduces drugstore profits. So with reimbursement rates being reduced and drugstores unable to offset those reductions with other sales, closure is the natural result. And we're at a point where the current pharmacy model is just not sustainable anymore. Roughly 1 out of every 8 pharmacies closed between 2009 and 2015. That disproportionately affected independent pharmacies and low-income neighborhoods, according to a study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. There's a link to that study if you want to go read it in the newsletter. Of course, people in low-income areas will suffer. Making their lives harder does not seem to matter much to people who are at the top of the food chain. There's also a link to a CNN article on this if you want to keep reading. Let's talk a little bit about long COVID. What the hell is going on with long COVID? How come people get that? Well, it turns out scientists and doctors have suspected for years that the cause of this mysterious condition, which can go on for months, may be reservoirs of the virus that remain hidden in the bodies of victims long after the acute infection, the coughing and the fever and the like, have passed. Earlier this month, a research team in the Boston area unveiled a study that suggested that this was true for almost half of the people suffering from long COVID. You can go read the Boston Globe article if you want. It's in the newsletter. I want to talk briefly about the ex-disgraced President Trump's medical records, because they are a crock of shit. Omarosa Manigault-Newman, who used to work for him, claimed former President Trump dictated what doctors wrote about his medical history, making the allegation during a recent CNN appearance. Quoting her, "Let's recall that Donald Trump dictated the letters that went out about his medical history, but doctors were not free to write what they want," Manigault-Newman said in a clip highlighted by Mediaite. The former Trump White House aide has endorsed Vice President Harris for the 2024 election and has been adamant about publicly chronicling her ex-boss's interactions with her. Anyway, I have an action for you. I want you to vote accordingly, up and down the ballot. Protect your rights, protect everyone's rights, up and down the ballot, and make lying wrong again. Just do that, and you know exactly what I mean. Down below, you can like, share, and subscribe. You can send requests for research. I'm happy to do it for you. And you can also send them to healthcareadvocacy1, all one word, @gmail.com. That's what I've got. Have a good weekend.